to a building he had owned for 9 years and found his wife sitting inside it, calling her lawyer to take everything he had ever built. For 11 years, he had been the kind of husband who did not announce himself. He paid the mortgage on time, every month, and always a week early. He fixed what broke. The leaking pipe under the kitchen sink the same weekend it started dripping. The back door that had swollen in its frame every July since they bought the house. The overhead light in the garage that needed rewiring, and that a different man would have called a contractor for. And that Marcus had handled on a Saturday afternoon with the panel shut off and a flashlight propped on the tool shelf. He drove his daughter Amara to her Saturday math competitions in a 2016 F-150 with a long scratch along the passenger door from a rebar accident on a job site in 2019 that he had considered repainting and then decided he would not. Because the truck still drove fine and he had never spent money on appearances when the function held. He supported Vanessa through her first marketing job, her pivot into account management, and then through the EMBA he paid for entirely, $63,000 across 2 years, while she studied and he handled the late-night feeds with a 6-month-old Amara on top of his own 50-hour work weeks. He never brought it up. He did not keep score. That was who he was. And while he was being that man, Vanessa had been meeting for 6 weeks with Kyle Mercer, one of Atlanta's most aggressive divorce attorneys, in a conference room on the 6th floor of a building Marcus had purchased outright in 2015 for $3.2 million. A building that now carried a market valuation of $11.8 million. A building with his name on the deed. Her building of choice. His building. Entirely. She had transferred $187,000 out of their joint account in 4 transactions timed between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The night before Marcus found her. She had written to her sister, "He has his truck and his paycheck. I'll be generous. But I'm done being the woman standing next to an engineer." She had written to the man she had been seeing for 14 months. "He's sweet, but he's small. I've been standing next to small for 11 years. What Vanessa did not know was that the Webb Legacy Trust, established before she ever knew Marcus's last name, carrying $31.4 million in net real estate holdings across 14 commercial properties and a 34-acre land parcel in Gwinnett County, was not a detail she had found, because she had never once thought to ask. What she did not know was that the building she had chosen for 6 weeks of planning was the one thing she could not take, because it had never been hers to take. What happened next would cost her everything she believed she had already secured. The story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:12 a.m. and Marcus Webb was already awake. He had been awake since 4:50, lying still in the gray quiet of the bedroom, listening to the ceiling fan and the distant pull of the city coming to life beyond the window. He was good at stillness. His father had taught him early, not the stillness of a man who has nothing to do, but the stillness of a man who has already decided what the day requires and has begun preparing his answer before anyone else in the house has opened their eyes. He got up without turning on the light. He moved through the bathroom in 6 minutes, the same 6 minutes it had always taken, and went downstairs in the dark. He filled his thermos with coffee, black, no sugar, the same way he had been drinking it since he was 23, and working his first structural engineering job on a highway overpass outside Decatur in January temperatures that kept coffee warm for about 12 minutes, if you were lucky. He screwed the lid tight. He picked up his yellow legal pad from the kitchen counter, the top sheet covered in notations from the night before, load calculations, a site visit schedule, a column of maintenance items for the Crescent Drive property, and tucked it under his arm. He moved through the house with the practiced quiet of a man who has learned to pass through spaces without disturbing what he loves. He paused at Amara's door. She was 12. She still slept with a small blue nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, the one Marcus had installed in her bedroom wall outlet when she was 4 and that had not moved since. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He did not go in. He listened to her breathe the slow, even breath of a child who has nothing worrying her. And then he went downstairs, took his keys from the hook he had mounted himself on a piece of reclaimed walnut from a barn renovation in 2018, and walked out to the driveway. The scratch on the passenger door of the F-150 caught the porch light. He had looked at it enough times now that it had become part of the truck the way a scar becomes part of a person. Present, unremarkable, not worth explaining unless someone asked. No one had asked in 4 years. He drove to the site first. He always drove to the site first. The project was a 9-story office structure going up on Marietta Street, a mixed-use commercial build his firm had been consulting on for 14 months. He arrived at 6:20 a.m. and walked the east foundation perimeter before the crew had finished setting up. He moved slowly, thermos in one hand, site notebook in the other. At the northeast load column he crouched and read the rebar placement. He ran the spacing in his head. The secondary vertical bars were 2 inches short of spec in a 3-foot section. 2 inches short was not dramatic. On a 9-story structure, 2 inches short was not a detail. He pulled the orange chalk from his jacket pocket, marked the section with 2 lines and a question mark, and clipped a note to the foreman's clipboard before the foreman arrived. The foreman came at 6:55 and saw it. He came over. "How did you catch that?" "Because I looked at it long enough," Marcus said. His father had told him that once, on a job site in 1997 when Marcus was 12 and had come along to watch. His father had said that most problems were not mysterious, they were just overlooked. Most people did not slow down long enough to look at the thing directly. Marcus had been slowing down and looking at things directly his entire career. It was what made him good. It was what made him, in the end, the wrong man to underestimate. He was back in the truck by 7:30. He drove toward the office downtown, windows down against the November cold, the city moving past him in its ordinary morning rhythm. He passed 1440 Crescent Drive on the way. 14 stories at the corner of Crescent and Forsyth, the building he had purchased in 2015 and renovated over the following 2 years with his own specifications and a crew he trusted. The renovation had cost $1.1 million and had taken his own weekends for the better part of a year. He had designed the HVAC routing on floors 6 through 9 himself, after the original contractor's plan would have created a cold zone in the northern offices every January. The building now returned $74,000 a month in lease revenue across 12 occupied floors. He did not slow down as he passed it. He did not need to. He knew it the way he knew the structure of his own hands. The office was a restored 1940s building on Mitchell Street, the kind of building most people would have knocked down and that Marcus had instead spent 8 months bringing back, straightening the original hardwood floors, exposing the brick, rewiring the east wing. His consulting firm, Webb Structural, occupied the second floor. 3 engineers, 2 project managers, years, and who kept the site files current without being asked. Marcus arrived at 7:52 and worked through the morning without interruption. Conference call at 9. Site review at 11. Lunch at his desk. A sandwich packed at home the night before, wrapped in parchment and labeled in Amara's handwriting, because she had decided at age 8 to label everything he took to work and had not stopped doing it in 4 years. He smiled at the label every time. He put the wrapper in the trash and went back to work. The thing about Vanessa's contempt was that it had arrived gradually, the way most serious structural failures arrive. Not a sudden collapse, but a slow accumulation of stress on a load-bearing point that was never designed to hold what was being asked of it. Marcus had not missed it. He had watched it arrive in the same methodical way he watched problems arrive on job sites, making notes, not yet moving, believing it would resolve. It had started about 18 months ago. A new bag, Italian leather, that appeared on the kitchen counter one evening without explanation. He had not asked. A new perfume that was not the perfume she had worn since before they were married. A way of leaving dinner early on certain nights, client event she'd say, or a work thing, same tone, same economy of explanation. Her phone, which she used to leave on the kitchen island when she got home, now traveled with her from room to room and sat face down on the nightstand while she slept. She had started referring to his work differently, not directly, not with criticism exactly, but with a subtle narrowing, the way a person adjusts a frame to crop something out. Stable, she called his career when her friends asked. Marcus does well. Stable, as if the word were meant to be kind, and both of them understood it was not. At a dinner party in October, she had mentioned a colleague. She had said his name 3 times in the course of one conversation, always with a brightness she did not apply to other names, and had paused before adding that he was in corporate strategy. She had looked at Marcus once while she said it. A flat, assessing look, there and gone in less than a second. He had said nothing. He had refilled his glass and changed the subject and driven home and washed the dishes and put them away in the right places and gone to bed. Amara knew something was different. She didn't say so directly. She was 12 and precise, like her father, and she did not name things she wasn't sure about. But she had taken to sitting closer to Marcus at dinner, close enough that their arms touched on the tabletop, and she had started asking him to quiz her on math problems in the evening, which had always been something they did together, but which she now initiated every night without fail. He quizzed her. He watched her work through things she had gotten wrong and try them again without quitting. He recognized the quality. He took it as a sign that whatever else was fracturing, this part of the house was still holding. At 4:15 on a Tuesday afternoon in November, his building manager called. Jerome Watts had been managing Marcus's downtown properties for 6 years with a calm efficiency that Marcus respected and relied on. Jerome called about a temperature complaint from Meridian Commons, the co-working operation that leased the 6th floor of 1440 Crescent. A zone damper, possibly a calibration issue. Marcus said he would stop by on his way home and take a look. He reached Crescent Drive at 4:45. He parked in the owner's space in the building's parking structure. He took the elevator to 6 with Jerome, who was already describing the zone calibration issue in technical detail, the kind of detail Marcus appreciated because it was specific and direct. They came off the elevator into the long glass-walled corridor of Meridian Commons. Conference rooms on both sides, open desk clusters, phone pods. The northern rooms were at the far end. Jerome was walking, talking, pointing toward the northern ceiling units. Marcus was following Jerome and making a notation on the legal pad when he heard the laugh. He almost kept walking. He had taken 2 more steps before something pulled him back. Not suspicion, not intuition exactly, but the particular quality of the sound, the specific register of it, so familiar that his body registered it before his mind did. He stopped. Through the glass wall of conference room 6C, a woman in a pale blazer sat at the head of the table. Her hair was up. Documents spread across the table in front of her. A manila folder open at one end, papers arranged in 2 stacks. A man in a dark suit sat across from her. Late 40s, silver watch. the compact, unhurried authority of someone who spent his days in rooms like this. Between them, a laptop, a yellow legal pad, 2 glasses of water. Her cell phone lay face up on the table's edge with its screen lit. It was Vanessa. Marcus stood at the glass for 7 seconds. He counted them without deciding to. She was leaning forward, one hand moving across a document, her mouth shaping words he could not fully hear through the glass. The man in the suit was writing. He had the careful, unhurried handwriting of someone who charges by the hour and knows the value of exact language. On the table between them, Marcus could see the corner of what appeared to be a financial summary, rows of numbers printed in a small, clean font. Through the glass, muffled but unmistakable, he heard her say, "Everything in the account. Every dollar." He heard nothing else. Jerome was still talking somewhere behind him. Marcus said, "Give me a minute, Jerome," and then walked back to the elevator before Jerome could respond. He pressed the lobby button. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked at the brushed steel of the elevator doors closing. He did not think about what he had seen in the way a man thinks about something he is still processing. He simply stood with it, the way he stood with structural problems, identifying the scope of the thing completely. Before making a move, he sat in the truck in the parking structure for 22 minutes without starting the engine. His hands rested on the steering wheel. He was not shaking. He noticed this. He opened the tenant access portal for 1440 Crescent Drive on his phone. Conference room 6C was booked for 6 days per week for the past 6 weeks under the name Vanessa Webb, with a billing email he did not recognize, a separate account he would later confirm she had opened 14 months ago. Specifics: 6 weeks. She had been coming to his building for 6 weeks to plan how to take everything she thought he had. He started the truck. He drove to his brother Elijah's house. Elijah Webb was 2 years older and had the same dark, still eyes their father had. Eyes that did not alarm easily and that could hold a hard thing without moving away from it. He opened his front door, looked at Marcus's face, and said, "Come in." He didn't ask what was wrong. He poured 2 glasses of water and set them on the kitchen table and waited until Marcus sat down before he said anything at all. Marcus told him everything. The conference room, the man in the suit, the muffled sound of her voice through the glass, the booking records, the phone, face up, screen lit. When he finished, Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She's doing this in your building." "Yes." "Which building?" "Crescent." Elijah said nothing for 3 seconds. His jaw tightened. He stood and walked the length of the kitchen once and came back. "I want to go over there, no," Marcus said. "This has to be done legally. All the way. Nothing else." Elijah looked at his brother across the kitchen table, at the composure of him, at the stillness that had always been the thing people misread as distance, and that was, in fact, something different, something more like accuracy. He said, "Okay, tell me what you need." Marcus went home. He got Amara dinner. He helped her with a geometry proof at the kitchen table, checking her work without correcting it until she had tried twice herself, the same way he had always done it. He read her a chapter of the book they had been going through together for 2 months. He said goodnight. He went to the home office at the end of the upstairs hall, the room with dark wood paneling and built-in shelves he had designed and installed himself 3 years ago. The shelves full of his father's books and his own engineering texts, and a framed photograph of his father standing on a job site in 1988, in the same Carhartt jacket Marcus now wore. He sat at the desk. He opened the filing cabinet in the lower left drawer and removed the folder marked Webb Legacy Trust. He spread the documents on the desk and spent 90 minutes reviewing what he already knew by memory. Then he went to bed. He was already awake before the alarm. He called Patricia Hollins at 8:03 a.m. He had kept her name filed away for 3 years from a referral a colleague had mentioned in passing, the kind of name you note and hope you never need. Patricia Hollins ran Hollins & Reed on Peachtree. She was 51. Howard undergrad. Emory Law. Former senior partner at a larger firm until she started her own. She handled high-asset divorces with a precision and composure that, by multiple accounts, had not wavered once across 17 years and somewhere in the range of 400 depositions. Her assistant told Marcus she could see him Thursday at 11. He said he would be there. He drove to the Midtown property first. He did the walk-through. He answered emails in the parking lot, unhurried. He went back to the office. He made Amara's lunch that evening before bed. Turkey on whole wheat, carrot sticks, pretzels, and a note in his own handwriting at the bottom. "You've got this." He had been putting notes in her lunch since 2nd grade. He would not stop now. That was not something he would let this take from him. He walked into Patricia Hollins's conference room at 10:58 a.m. on Thursday with the Webb Legacy Trust documents in a manila folder, the legal pad, and a pen. He laid the documents on her desk in a single precise stack. He told her everything in sequence: the conference room, the booking records, the transfer, the text he had found a man named Derek Holt that read, "He doesn't know anything. He's sweet but he's small, Derek. I've been standing next to small for 11 years. He told her about the trust. He told her about the 14 properties. He told her the net valuation as of the March appraisal. Patricia Hollins listened without interruption and without expression. When he finished, she reached for the top document. She read it. She turned to the second. She went through the first 5 pages without speaking, and then she set them down and looked at him directly. "She doesn't know," she said. It was not a question. "She never asked," Marcus said. "Not once in 11 years." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "All right. Here is what we're going to do." Vanessa filed for divorce the following Monday through Kyle Mercer's office, with a motion for emergency exclusive possession of the marital residence, citing what she described in the filing as financial volatility in the household. She had told her sister that morning, "This is going to be clean. He has his truck and his paycheck. I'll get the house. Kyle says we can settle in 90 days. She had also, at some point in the previous 2 weeks, told Derek Holt, "When this is done, I'll finally have something real." Derek had apparently agreed. He had apparently been more enthusiastic about her plan than she later understood him to have been. Kyle Mercer was one of Atlanta's most recognized divorce attorneys. He billed at $400 an hour, wore suits that cost more than some people's monthly rent, and had a reputation for aggressive asset discovery that had, over the course of his career, located hidden accounts in Cyprus, properties in 3 states, and 1 offshore trust that had taken a forensic team 8 months to untangle. He was, by every professional measure, the right choice for a spouse who believed her husband was concealing assets. He had simply never had a case where the husband's hidden assets were already under his client's feet. Patricia filed her notice of the Webb Legacy Trust as separate property within 48 hours of Vanessa's petition. The motion for emergency exclusive possession of the marital home was denied. Patricia hired a forensic accountant named Sandra Park, 10 years at a Big Four firm before she went independent, with a specialty in marital asset fraud, to trace the $187,000 transfer. Sandra Park's preliminary report arrived in 12 days. It documented that the transfer had been executed in 4 transactions, each structured below the $50,000 automated review threshold, timed between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The term Sandra Park used in her report was deliberate structuring. The Dawes office, Patricia noted quietly, took a particular interest in that phrase. Elijah spent 2 weekends in the storage room at the back of their father's old office, pulling archived records, original deeds, trust amendments, correspondence with the estate attorney going back to 1988, appraisals from 4 decades of property decisions. He drove them to Marcus's house on a Sunday evening and put them in the filing cabinet without ceremony. "Pop saved everything," Elijah said. He knew. Marcus nodded. Their father had known because he had learned early that wealth without documentation was wealth without defense, and he had taught both of his sons this the same way he had taught them everything, till it became who they were. Marcus discovered during this period, through Patricia's investigator, that Derek Holt, the man Vanessa had been texting, the man whose name she had said 3 times at a dinner party in October with a brightness she reserved for things she cared about, ran a consulting firm on the 4th floor of 1440 Crescent Drive. Holt Consulting, 4 employees, established 2019, paying $6,800 a month in rent directly into the Webb Legacy Trust account. For 14 months, Derek Holt had been using the building Marcus owned as his place of business, taking Marcus's wife on the side and helping her plan how to leave Marcus with nothing. He had done all of this without knowing, apparently, that his monthly rent check went to a trust in Marcus's name. When this fact made its way to Derek Holt through sources that were never entirely clear, possibly his own attorney, possibly someone at Mercer's office reviewing the trust disclosure, he stopped returning Vanessa's calls within 4 days. His lease on the 4th floor was up for renewal in January. He did not renew it. He relocated his firm to a building in Midtown in February, without a word to anyone in the Crescent building, leaving behind a suite with scuff marks on the baseboard and 2 light bulbs burned out in the overhead fixtures. Meanwhile, Kyle Mercer had been building what he believed was a winning case. He had advised Vanessa that Marcus's disclosed assets would consist of the consulting firm, worth, in his estimate, between $400,000 and $800,000, the marital home with its partial equity, and a retirement account. He had told her they could move quickly, that Marcus would have limited means to fight prolonged litigation, and that the $187,000 pre-transfer was an aggressive but defensible financial protection measure. He had told her, "We'll be done by spring." The financial disclosure arrived at Mercer's office on a Thursday morning in January. It ran 47 pages. The Webb Legacy Trust disclosure alone ran 12 pages, followed by 22 pages of supporting appraisals, acquisition records, and trust instrument citations. 14 commercial properties, a 34-acre land parcel in Gwinnett County. Net real estate holdings as of March, $31.4 million. Patricia learned later, through a mutual attorney contact in the city, that Kyle Mercer had set the disclosure down on his desk and sat quietly for approximately 4 minutes before calling Vanessa. He had told her, "We have a problem." She had asked what kind. He had told her, "A trust. Real estate. A lot of it. Established before the marriage by 5 years." Patricia's contact told her that Vanessa had not responded for a long time after that the phone had been very quiet, that Kyle had finally said her name twice to confirm she was still on the line. She was still on the line. She had just run out of the words she had prepared. Mercer filed 3 separate motions challenging the trust's separate property classification over the following 6 weeks. The first argued that Marcus had co-mingled trust revenue with marital funds at some point during the marriage, which would have partially converted the trust to marital property under Georgia equitable distribution principles. Patricia countered with 11 years of the trust's independently maintained bank records, showing 0 transfers into any joint marital account. The motion failed. The second argued that Vanessa had contributed indirectly to the appreciation of the trust properties through her role supporting the household during the years Marcus was acquiring and managing the portfolio. Patricia countered with Sandra Park's analysis, which documented that Marcus had been running his consulting firm at full capacity throughout the marriage, and that the household expenses had been split from a joint account to which both parties contributed approximately equally. There was no demonstrable case of sacrifice for portfolio. The motion failed. The third argued that Marcus had not fully disclosed the trust's existence during the marriage, and that concealment should factor into equitable division. Patricia noted, in a single paragraph that Marcus read with something close to satisfaction, that Georgia law does not require spouses to volunteer disclosure of premarital separate property, and that the trust had been filed publicly with the county and was discoverable by anyone who thought to look. No one had thought to look. The motion failed. Mercer then attempted to argue that Marcus had used marital funds to maintain the trust properties. Sandra Park's forensic accounting report, now a full 40-page document, demonstrated with complete specificity that every maintenance expenditure, every tax payment, and every capital improvement across all 14 properties had been funded from the trust's own lease revenue. Not a single dollar drawn from marital accounts. There was nothing to argue against. The documents were exact. Marcus kept exact records of everything, the same way his father had, the same way a structural engineer who builds things meant to last has to. What Marcus did not see, because he was not present for it, was what happened to Vanessa during those 11 weeks while her attorney's motions were failing one by one. He learned it later, from fragments, from Elijah, from a mutual friend who had stayed in contact with Vanessa's sister, from the particular quality of Vanessa's posture when she walked into that conference room in December. He assembled it the way he assembled everything, methodically, without rushing to a conclusion before the full picture came in. What he assembled was this. Vanessa had called Derek Holt 3 times in the week after the trust disclosure arrived at Mercer's office. Derek had answered twice, and then, on the third call, had let it go to voicemail. She had shown up at his office building, a building in Midtown, not Marcus's, on a Wednesday afternoon. Derek had sent her a text from inside the building that said, "I can't do this right now." She had waited 40 minutes in the lobby and then left. He did not come down. His lease at 1440 Crescent had been expiring in January, and he had already begun negotiating space elsewhere, a fact that, in Vanessa's accounting of events, she had not been told until she heard it from his assistant when she called the Holt Consulting mainline a week later. She had told her sister by phone, during the week before the settlement conference, "I don't understand what happened." Her sister had said, "You planned it without knowing what you were planning against." There was a pause. Vanessa had said, "He never told me." Her sister had said, very quietly, "Did you ever ask?" There was a longer pause, and then the call had ended, and, as far as anyone could confirm, they had not spoken again for several months after that. The settlement conference was held on a Friday in December in Patricia Hollins's conference room on the 22nd floor of a glass tower in Buckhead. The room had a pale birch table and windows that ran floor to ceiling on the south wall, giving a view of the city skyline extending toward the airport on clear days. Marcus arrived at 9:52 a.m. He was wearing a charcoal jacket over a gray shirt. No tie. He carried the legal pad and a pen. He helped Patricia arrange the document stacks before Vanessa and Kyle Mercer arrived. Trust instruments on the left, forensic report in the center, property appraisals on the right. He adjusted one stack by a 1/4 inch. He sat down. He was looking at the view through the south window when they arrived at 10:01. Vanessa came in first. She was in a dark coat, her hair down. She looked like someone who had been preparing for this and had prepared for the wrong version of it, composed in the way that takes visible effort. She sat across the table and looked at Marcus for a long moment, and then looked at the documents stacked in front of Patricia. Kyle Mercer came in behind her and sat without greeting anyone, setting his legal pad open on the table, his pen uncapped. He was a large man with silver at his temples and the practiced, unreadable composure of a man who had sat in a lot of these rooms. Today his composure was doing more work than usual. Mercer opened. He spoke about the marital home. He spoke about the joint accounts. He described the $187,000 transfer as a reasonable protective measure, citing case precedent. Patricia let him finish. Then, she opened her folder and placed Sandra Park's forensic report in the center of the table, turned to page 9, and said, "The transfers were structured specifically to avoid automated review thresholds. The timing, sequencing, and account routing are documented on pages 9 through 14. The district attorney's office has received a copy of this report." Kyle Mercer's pen stopped moving. Patricia continued. She walked through the trust disclosure, property by property, date by date. She cited the Georgia statute on separate property, the trust instrument, and the 3 precedent cases that Mercer's own previous motions had attempted to distinguish, and had failed to distinguish. She was not raised in her voice. She was not performing anything. She moved through the material with the unhurried precision of someone who had spent 11 weeks building something that did not need drama to stand. When she finished, Kyle Mercer was sitting with his legal pad closed and his pen set flat on the table in front of him. Vanessa was looking at the documents. Then, she was looking at her hands. The room was quiet except for the ventilation system running somewhere behind the walls. Marcus heard it. That was the only sound, the quiet, steady hum of a system he had not designed and would have designed differently, running behind the walls of a room where his marriage was ending. In a city where 14 buildings had his name on their deeds. In a building where a woman who had called him small for 11 years was sitting across from him, learning the full scope of what she had never once thought to ask about. He looked at Vanessa. He looked at her for a long moment without anger, without satisfaction, without anything that needed a name. He thought about 11 years of packed lunches and fixed pipes and late-night work sessions, and a daughter who still slept with a blue crescent moon nightlight in the same outlet where he had put it when she was 4. He thought about the dinner party in October, and the text about being small, and the 6 weeks of planning in his own building. He said, "You built a picture. You lived inside it for 11 years. And you never once thought to check if it was real." His voice was even. He was not raising it. He had never raised it, not once in 11 years, and he would not raise it now. "I never hid from you. I never asked you not to look. You decided what you saw was everything. That's not something I did to you." He picked up his pen. He looked at Patricia. Patricia nodded. The settlement took 4 hours to finalize. The trust assets were confirmed as separate property and excluded entirely from the marital estate. The marital home, valued at $640,000 with a $190,000 mortgage remaining, was divided as required by Georgia law. Marcus bought out Vanessa's equity to keep the house for Amara's stability. The $187,000 transfer was recorded in the settlement agreement and offset dollar for dollar against Vanessa's marital distribution. After the offset, she walked away with $38,000. The forensic report remained with the Dawes office. The wire fraud investigation was ongoing. Kyle Mercer signed where he needed to sign. He gathered his papers. He shook Patricia's hand, briefly, the carefully maintained posture of a man who understands that some mornings do not go the way they were prepared to go, and who has decided that the most professional available response is to leave quickly and without production. Vanessa stood last. She put on her coat. She stood at the table for a moment with the settlement documents in front of her and the city behind her through the south windows, and Marcus across the table, his legal pad closed, his pen in his pocket, his hands still. She said, "You should have told me." Marcus was quiet. He considered the architecture of that sentence, what it claimed, what it declined to claim, what it placed on him, and what it removed from her. He said, "I never hid who I was. You looked at me and decided what you saw was everything. That's not something I did to you." He picked up the legal pad. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked at the stainless steel doors. He did not look back. The months that followed were quiet in the way that things become quiet when a long structural tension is finally resolved. Not empty, but settled, like a building that has been tested and is held. Marcus refinanced the house at a rate 2 points below what he had been paying. He repainted Amara's room, the shade of sage green she had been asking for since September. Measured twice, cut once, taped the trim with the patience of a man who had been cutting clean lines his entire working life, and finished in a single Saturday afternoon while she sat below the tape line working on a proof and narrating her week to him without looking up. He stood back when he was done and looked at the color. It was exactly right. He had known it would be. He drove the F-150. He kept the scratch. The $38,000 Vanessa received from the settlement, what remained after the $187,000, by the accounting of people who knew what she had been expecting, approximately $282,000 less than she had calculated. Kyle Mercer's fees for 11 weeks of failed motions were billed at $400 an hour. She paid that herself. The Dawes office received Sandra Park's full forensic report in January and opened a formal inquiry in March. Marcus did not follow it closely. What it resolved to was not his concern. His concern was the house, the trust, and Amara's lunch on Monday morning. The 34-acre Gwinnett County parcel, the land his father had bought in 1991 and passed down through the trust, the land Vanessa had never known about, because she had never asked what his father had left him. Sold in March to a commercial development group for $9.8 million, $700,000 above the spring appraisal. Marcus noted it in the legal pad. Updated the trust ledger with Elijah on a Sunday afternoon over coffee that had gone slightly cold by the time they finished. He drove to a site visit in Marietta the next morning at 6:30. He did not celebrate in any way that anyone would have recognized as celebration. He was 63 years old inside when he thought about his father and what his father had known and had never needed to say out loud. Some things you demonstrate. You demonstrate them until they become who your children are. The fourth-floor suite at 1440 Crescent Drive was released in April at $7,400 a month. $600 more per month than Holt Consulting had been paying, to a landscape architecture firm whose two principals had been looking for downtown space for 8 months. Marcus's property manager confirmed the new lease by email on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus read the email. He forwarded it to Jerome with a note to update the floor plan directory in the lobby. He went back to his site calculations. Vanessa left the house she and Marcus had been renting together in Buckhead, the house she had intended to keep, and moved to a one-bedroom apartment in Brookhaven in February. Marcus learned this from Amara, who mentioned it with the careful evenness of a 12-year-old who was describing a fact and declining to assign it a feeling. He did not add anything to what Amara said. He nodded and asked her about the math competition, and she told him, in specific and animated detail, about a problem involving the intersection of two linear functions that she had solved 2 seconds faster than the next fastest competitor, and he listened to every word. Patricia Hollins's final bill arrived in February. Marcus paid it the day it landed. He included a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for your precision." She told a colleague later it was the first handwritten note a client had sent her in several years, and that she had kept it in the top drawer of her desk. On a Tuesday morning in June, 7 months after the settlement, Marcus stopped at 1440 Crescent Drive on his way to the office. Jerome had a maintenance schedule he wanted to walk through in person. Marcus parked in the owner's space. He took the elevator to 6. It was early, just past 7, and Meridian Commons was still mostly empty, the desk clusters unoccupied, the glass conference rooms quiet and lit from the east. He walked the corridor. He turned at the far end. Conference room 6C was empty. The chairs were tucked in. The table was bare. Morning light came through the east-facing windows and fell in long, clean rectangles across the floor and the pale walls. He stood in the doorway. He did not go in. He stood there and let himself look at it directly, the way he looked at everything, completely, without moving away from it. He thought about standing at this glass 8 months ago, counting 7 seconds, hearing the muffled sound of her voice saying every dollar. He thought about the parking structure below. 22 minutes, hands on the steering wheel. He thought about how he had not been shaking. He capped his pen. He went to find Jerome. At 7:55 that morning, he dropped Amara at school. She had a regional math competition the following week and had been drilling practice problems every evening after dinner, her notebook open on the kitchen table, asking Marcus to quiz her the way they had always done. He had quizzed her. He had watched her get a proof wrong 3 times on a Monday and correct it on the 4th attempt Tuesday evening, and he had seen her face at the moment she got it. A small, exact satisfaction. Nothing dramatic. Just the look of a person who had worked at something until it gave way. He had recognized it in her immediately. It was the same expression he made when a structural problem resolved, when a load calculation came back clean, when a building he had built stood after a storm had moved through. She got out of the truck at 7:55 and he called after her, "You've got this." She waved without turning around. She had already decided the same thing. He merged onto the highway. The morning light came across the rooftops, and the scratch on the passenger door caught it for a moment, and then didn't. He drove the way he always drove, hands steady, eyes forward, no hurry, no looking back. There was work ahead of him. Good work. Specific work. The kind of work that required patience and precision and full attention. He had learned a long time ago that the only direction that mattered was the one you were building toward, and that you built toward it the same way you built anything meant to last, piece by piece, without announcing it, until the work announced itself. He went to do it. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you.